I went into the dark little hospital room. My heart was beating a bit faster, even though I'd helped patients before. This felt strange. I'd seen a lot as a nurse, but nothing like this. Mr. Jacobs, a quiet man around 45, usually just had regular checkups. I was there to get him ready for his next one. When I went in, he seemed nervous, fidgeting in bed. "Is everything all right, Mr. Jacobs?" I asked, smiling gently. Then, I saw something under his gown. It was easy to see through the cloth. I was so shocked I froze. It wasn't something I expected. My face got red, but I remembered I was a nurse. Strange things happen. "Let's get you ready," I said, trying to ignore it. But as I fixed his gown, it fell open, showing even more. I stopped, thinking fast. Should I say something or just leave? Then another nurse looked in. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to bother you," she said, and left. I was amazed she almost saw what I did. I looked back at Mr. Jacobs. He looked even more embarrassed, and his eyes. He kind of hinted at something more. "I'm so sorry," he stuttered, his voice shaky. I tried to stay cool, saying, "It's all right. Let's just prep you for your test." But as I grabbed some stuff, his hand grazed mine, making me stop. Was it on purpose? Or was he saying something else? Just when things couldn't get weirder, the door opened again. It was the doctor, clueless about what just happened. "All good here?" he asked, looking at us. I nodded quickly, wanting him to take over so I could go. Even after I left, the weird feeling stuck with me. I kept thinking about Mr. Jacobs' worried face and what he did. Later, I got a message. Mr. Jacobs asked for me for his next checkup. My stomach flipped. Why me? Was it just because I was there before, or was there something else? The next day, I had to face it. I went back to his room, trying to act normal, but it was super awkward. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not the nervous one from before, but a confident one. "I've been thinking about you," he whispered, making my heart skip a beat. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off and get back to business. "Let's focus on finishing your exam," I said. Level, however, as I was about to manage the door, it swung open abruptly, this time revealing Mr. Jacobs' wife. My heart seized. She entered, fixing a sharp gaze on me that filled the room with instant tension. Swiftly, I excused myself and left the room to avoid further complications. But as I continued my rounds, the incident lingered in my mind, troubling me with questions about his intentions and my own perceptions. Later, while handling my usual duties, I received another alert from the front desk. Mr. Jacobs had specifically requested my assistance again. Steeling myself, I headed to his room with a firm resolve to maintain professionalism upon entering. I found him sitting up in bed, an unsettling energy permeating the room. "I'm glad you're here," he stated slowly, his voice calm. I responded with neutrality. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Jacobs." He seemed unfazed by my cool demeanor and briefly appeared as if he might say something inappropriate. But suddenly, the doctor burst in, oblivious to the underlying tension, and began reviewing some documents, unaware of the charged atmosphere relieved by his interruption. I seized the opportunity to discreetly exit the room. As I walked down the corridor, I pondered what might have transpired had the doctor not entered the scenario. Could have escalated, pushing boundaries further. With Mr. Jacobs, the remainder of my shift was overshadowed by a nagging feeling that the situation was far from resolved. His lingering looks and subtle touches seemed to play into a dangerous game, one I was reluctant to engage in by the end of the day as I neared the hospital exit. Eager to forget the day's events, I was startled to find Mr. Jacobs waiting by the door. "I just need to talk." He insisted, stepping closer, which quickened my pulse yet. Before I could reply, a colleague called out to me. Mr. Jacobs turned, leaving abruptly, standing there alone, for now. My walk down the hallway was tense, my heart pounding as I reflected on Mr. Jacobs' increasingly troubling behavior. While part of me wanted to dismiss it all, another part acknowledged that further complications might arise the next day. I endeavored to focus on my other patient, steering clear of Mr. Jacobs' room. However, during a brief break, another message from the front desk arrived. He was requesting to see me. Once again, hesitantly, I made my way to his room this time, prepared to end any inappropriate advances. Definitively upon entry, I noticed Mr. Jacobs gazing out the window, his expression unreadable. The atmosphere momentarily still. "I wanted to talk to you," he said without looking at me, his tone serious. I maintained my position near the door, cautious about what happened earlier. "I think you understand," he continued, turning slowly, his eyes searching mine for recognition. I swallowed hard, uncertain of how to respond, still aiming to uphold my professional duty. "I'm here to assist with your medical care," I stated firmly, trying to keep the conversation focused. Before I could elaborate, the door swung open again. This time it was his wife. She glanced sharply between us, the tension escalating as she took in the scene. "What's going on here?" she demanded. I stepped back, instinctively, my heart racing. "I was just leaving," I said, moving toward the door, feeling her intense gaze on my back as I exited in the hallway. I took deep breaths to calm myself, questioning whether Mr. Jacobs had been flirting with me in front of his wife, or if I was misinterpreting the situation entirely. The rest of my shift was a blur, each passing moment heavy with the weight of earlier events. As I prepared to leave for the day, Mrs. Jacobs approached me at the front desk. "We need to talk," she stated coldly, her stern look prompting me to follow her away from other staff members. Once isolated, she confronted me, arms crossed. "I know what's been going on with my husband," she accused. I was taken aback. "That's not true," I began, but she cut me off sharply. "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "I've seen how he looks at you, how you respond." I shook my head, trying to clarify. "It's not what you think. I'm just his nurse." Her eyes narrowed skeptically. "I'm not naive. He's changed since you started caring for him, and I know it's because of you." I opened my mouth to protest further, but she didn't allow it. "If you think you can come between us, you're mistaken," she warned, her voice low and threatening. "Stay away from my husband." With that, she turned and left, leaving me speechless and overwhelmed by I wasn't aware of Mr. Jacobs' strange actions. I wasn't responsible, but his wife believed I was and wouldn't drop it. The next few days were very stressful. I stayed away from Mr. Jacobs as much as I could, but the situation bothered me. I kept thinking about his wife's words and his odd behavior. I felt like I was stuck in a situation I didn't want to be in. One evening, as I was leaving work, I ran into Mr. Jacobs. He was waiting for me. I felt awful because I couldn't avoid him. "We need to talk," he said, coming closer. I tried to stay calm. "I think it's best we keep things professional," I said, but he ignored me. "My wife talked to you, right?" he asked, sounding worried. "Yes," I replied, "and I think we should respect what she wants." But instead of agreeing, he smiled creepily. "She doesn't know the whole story," he whispered. Before I could ask him what he meant, he grabbed my wrist. I pulled away quickly, my heart pounding. "What are you doing?" I asked, backing away. He grinned. "You're not going to tell anyone, are you? We both know how this will look." I was shocked by his nerve and started to leave to report him, but I stopped when I saw Mrs. Jacobs standing outside. She'd heard some of our conversation. I felt trapped. She didn't do anything, just watched us, her eyes moving between her husband and me. A small part of me wondered if she'd planned this. The tension was thick, and I almost lost my courage. I hated to think it, but something about Mr. Jacobs had stuck with me, the way he looked at me. I noticed Mr. Jacobs' small actions and bold comments. I told myself this was wrong, but my body reacted anyway. Did his wife suspect something? The atmosphere was tense, and I questioned my own judgment. There was something compelling about Mr. Jacobs. His look, his gestures, even his appearance, which had surprised me earlier. I tried to ignore these feelings, reminding myself it was improper, but my body wouldn't listen. The forbidden aspect was attractive, a dangerous thrill I liked, despite knowing better. Mrs. Jacobs kept watching, her face giving nothing away, and I felt uneasy. Did she know what was happening, or was she clueless? Mr. Jacobs came closer, speaking quietly and surely. She won't cause a fuss. She knows better, he said. His tone made me want to move away, but his strong presence held me there, confusing my thoughts and feelings. This isn't right, I murmured, mostly to myself. He moved closer still, his breath on my neck, his hand grazing my waist, making me shiver. I should have left, but I froze, my professional behavior gone as his touch remained. This was very wrong, but a part of me was captivated by the situation. The tension suddenly ended when Mrs. Jacobs came in looking calm but firm. "Is everything okay?" she asked evenly. I quickly stepped back, my heart racing. "Yes, I was just leaving," I stuttered, trying to compose myself. Looking back at her, I saw something in her eyes. Was it amusement or something more, knowing? Had she expected this, or even wanted it to happen? I gathered my belongings, my thoughts spinning as I hurried down the corridor. I felt as though I had narrowly escaped a dire situation, yet also left something unresolved. The encounter with Mr. Jacobs left me deeply conflicted, my mind overwhelmed by what had occurred and the lingering temptation that I couldn't shake off. What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I simply forget him? But deep down I understood the allure, the danger, the thrill, the forbidden. I wasn't sure if I wanted to escape it. My unsettling interaction with Mr. Jacobs left me both confused and strangely invigorated. Yet I also felt I had ventured too close to something perilous. Just then, Mrs. Jacobs appeared, her intense expression matching her soft yet firm voice, called, wanting to talk. I nervously followed her to a private office down the hallway. She shut the door, making things feel really uncertain. "I've noticed how he looks at you," she started, serious, but not mean. "And I know what happened, but I'm not trying to get you in trouble." Confused, I asked what she meant. She sighed, looking right at me. "I know my husband. I can't help you." I told her I didn't understand. "I'm not who you think," she said seriously. "Tom has a bad side. He tricks everyone. I've been watching you, and he wants something from you." I felt scared. "Why help me?" I asked. "Because I want to show everyone who he really is," she said. "He's been lying to both of us." She gave me a folder with papers and pictures showing a side of Mr. Jacobs I'd never seen. "See who he truly is," she said. "Then decide if you want to be involved." Suddenly, everything made sense. The excitement, the games, all his tricks. I was just a pawn. Mrs. Jacobs looked at me firmly. "This isn't just about us," she said. "It's about control, and I won't be controlled." She then took something small from her purse. "Help me, and we can beat him." I realized I'd stumbled into something much bigger, and the real game was starting.